Hello! Well, I cannot do it like Paul Massaro, but anyways, hello my friends, Captain Starsky here, and as always, it's so nice to see you, and guys, my Starlink is all over the place today. I hope that we will be able uh, to have the stream tonight without interruptions. Because it's very special, because tonight we are going to debunk Russian BS and break down this interesting situation that we have in Ukraine regarding the Russian Church. And every time you hear different supporters of the Russian terrorism in their social media as well as mass media, talking about violation of freedom of religion in Ukraine, that satanic junta in Ukraine shuts down Russian Church. And you may ask yourself, how come there's a Russian Church in Ukraine? Because we have a Russian church in Ukraine. How come we have Russian church? But that's a wrong question, my friends, because in order to answer this question, you have to ask another question. What's the origin of the Orthodox Church in Russia? So I prepared a short presentation for you guys. So in year 988 in Kyiv, this guy baptized the mighty kingdom of Kievan Rus. It happened in 988. That year, the kingdom of Kievan Rus adopted the Christianity, the Orthodox Christianity in Ukraine. And in year 988, the downtown in Kyiv would look like this, approximately. Because Kyiv already existed like 400 years before this Christianity was adopted. And basically in 10th century, we adopted the Christianity. It happened approximately 200 years before the village of Kuchkovo, that later became known as Moscow, even appeared on the map. So just so you could compare, this is the Kyiv downtown, approximately 988, and this is Moscovo, also known as Kuchkovo. Around that very time, basically it looked like this, so you could understand, because it didn't exist that year, and 100 years from that moment as well. And here on this picture, by the way, you can see the beautiful Desatina church in Kyiv. It was destroyed in 13th century, and it was the most kick-ass church in Europe around that period. One of the most kick-ass churches in the world, because it was huge, it was made out of stone, it's 1,000 years old. It was hilarious. And by the way, we still have remains of this church. So this is very beautiful place in Kyiv. It's located on the hill, and there you can see the foundation of this church. And on the background there is my favorite place in the world. Is called the Museum of History of Ukraine, and that's the place. My friends hate me because of this place, because whenever I'm there, I'm just going straight to the museum and I'm lost for the rest of the day. It's very nice. So one of the most, let's say, sacred spots in Ukraine, in Kyiv and in Ukraine, is this place known also as Peczerska Lavra. And it was created in 1051, basically 1000 years ago. Again, it was approximately 100 years before the Kuchkovo village, Kuchkovo, that later became known as Moscow, appeared. We all remember the way it looked like. It still looked like that, even 100 years after, 70 years after adoption of Christianity and foundation of Peczerska Lavra. So Peczerska Lavra in Kyiv, there's like a lot of churches and monasteries and big infrastructure that was created 1000 years ago. There are caves, there are underground corridors, there are tombs. It's amazing. But and just to mention, the center of Orthodox Christianity, with its main hub in Constantinople, nowadays it's Istanbul. It's where they have the Universal Orthodox Church, right? That Kievan church belonged to. So this church in Kyiv, this complex in Kyiv, this Peczerska Lavra, it was the biggest Orthodox center in the Eastern Europe, maybe in the Europe in general, okay? Because Kyiv was famous for this. You could not find anything like this in the world, except for probably Constantinople, where this Orthodox Christianity basically originated. But around 1240s, this man, and I consider him being an asshole for what he did, because this is Batu Han, and his grandson of Chinggis Khan, okay? So this man invaded Kievan Rus and completely destroyed this beauty. So he destroyed a lot of churches and looted stuff and yada yada. So that's why I consider him as asshole. I have a right as Ukrainian. So that's Batu Han. And when this happened, the priests from the Peczerska Lavra in Kyiv, they moved north. And around that time, Kuchkovo and Moscow didn't exist, but there were different provinces on the territory of modern Russia that basically belonged to Kievan Rus. So they escaped there. And for some reason, they liked it there. And the reason why they liked it there was because like Yuri Dolgoruki and other assholes that ran away from Kievan Rus and decided to make their own Las Vegas in the northern forests and swamps. they decided to make like their own kingdom, okay, and that's why they met those priests from Kyiv, and they were like, dudes, we have like the most kick-ass party here in the swamps. Did you see what those bears did? Like, we can do the same. Like, we can do all kinds of crazy shit. You gotta stay with us. And eventually, Ukrainian priests from Kyiv, they remained there and they started settling there and yada yada. They were moving between those northern territories, Moksha, Tmutarakань, and whatever, and Kyiv and back. And still, even though like all those provinces, they even later when Muscovia was created, still they referred to the main priest, the chief priest, patriarch of Orthodox Church, as the Patriarch of Kyiv and all Rus. And Rus, basically all the Slavic lands. Okay? So it was like that until 17th century. In the 17th century, there's a lecture on Tim Snyder. I cannot compete with Tim Snyder because he's awesome, but this is just a shorter version of what he says. Okay, because he's a historian, I'm a PR specialist. He can tell you the details, I can tell you the shorter story, but containing everything. So, in 17th century, approximately 1687, the Russian church that physically was in Muscovia, right? Because Russia didn't exist until 18th century. So they were located in Muscovia, and they went to Constantinople to see the universal chief of the universal patriarch of the Orthodox Church, and they told him, they said, Patriarch, we have a question. Can we absorb the Kievan Church? And the Patriarch was like, are you serious? I mean, this church gave birth to your church. You cannot absorb your mother church, being its child. It's wrong. But the Russian priest said, listen, like, we can figure out something, we can fix things, and like, come on with us, it's like, it's cool, like, we have something, man, like, you won't regret it. It's like, it's just here around the corner, so they did like whatever the Russians always do, and nobody knows how it happened, but it happened. And the daughter church, the child church, which was in Russia, absorbed the Kievan church due to the decision of the Universal Patriarch in Constantinople. And Kievan church had to obey. How it happened, again, nobody knows the details. There's a lot of controversies regarding this, but this is how it happened. And since that time, the patriarch of the church on this territory was referred to as the Patriarch of Moscow and all Rus. Prior to that, he was the Patriarch of Kyiv and whole Rus. Then he became the Patriarch of Moscow and the all Rus. So let's scroll to the times of Bolshevik Revolution in Ukraine and Russian Empire, because when Russian Revolution, why Russians wanted this church so much? It's because they wanted to have legacy they never had, actually. For example, Alexander Nevsky, Russian hero, Russian knight, noble knight and protector of the Orthodox Christianity, and for example, this is how he is being portrayed usually. Русский Витязь and shit like that, and he's like, you see, protector of Christianity, there's like Christ behind him and churches and everything else. But in reality, this is how his helmet looked like in real life. The interesting fact is that his helmet and that picture with angel and cross, it was added later in the 17th century. It wasn't there originally. And around this helmet, you can read in Arabic a surah from Quran. We're bringing you the good news from Allah regarding victory. Something approximately like this. And the fact is, he was a subordinate to the Golden Horde. And Russians were like their protectorate, basically. And we know that Batu Khan supported Islam in his army, and a lot of Russians, they adopted Islam, and Russians don't want to talk about it because they're building a picture of being like fanatically Orthodox Christians for like their whole history. However, for some period of history, they had Islam. It was okay. I mean, it's a normal religion, but for some reason they are shy to acknowledge this. And for the same very reason, they are too shy to acknowledge the fact that they had mutual parades with Germans, okay, before the 1941. They had mutual parades with with Nazi Germans. They don't like to talk about it, but internet remembers everything. And whenever they start saying some bullshit about like Nazi and yada yada, you should remind them about this. Because this is the mutual parade of the Red Army and Nazi Germans in Poland, but it's a different story, okay? It's a different topic, we're not talking about it today. So, during the Bolshevik Revolution, Russian communists, Russian Bolsheviks, they decided that actually they can gain a lot of money by looting churches around their empire, and they decided to loot and destroy all those churches regardless. In Ukraine, in Russia, in Belarus, in all those territories, priests were shot and executed, churches were looted, and they were doing all kinds of crazy like destroying buildings, raping goats, like whatever, like what they usually do, okay? So it was a disaster, and they killed thousands and thousands of priests. They were literally brought to gulags and executed and things like that. But there's an interesting thing. Somehow, churches in like Moscow, in St. Petersburg, and some specific churches around the USSR, they survived, and priests serving in those churches, they also survived, and majority of priests were like brutally executed, but at the same time, some priests were like totally fine. Like they continued serving, and people were visiting them and stuff like that. What happened? Like why? And the answer to this is very, very simple. People came to a church to confess, to tell their secrets, and Russian NKVD and later KGB, they knew about it. So they hired those priests, and those priests basically worked for KGB. A lot of them were like regular agents, and they were telling them the secrets that they heard and things like that, because people had only one escape that time. They could escape to church and receive some kind of relief and tell their stories and secrets and yada yada. And that was the reason why KGB used those priests. Again, they were literally like Russian agents trained to be priests. And this is how a bunch of churches, and as well as Russian Church itself, survived for decades, and until the collapse of the USSR. And after that was the only reason it survived, while all other churches were destroyed and priests were eliminated. So what happens next? Next, in 1992, in June, after the collapse of the USSR, the church, the priests who had more like patriotic views, I mean priests in Ukraine, they said, guys, Ukraine is an independent country, and we can finally have our church back. And they decided, like, why not? Let's have our own church. Let's return to our roots. Let's bring back our traditions. It's a good thing. So in June 1992, this month marks the rebirth of Ukrainian Church. But of course, because majority of Ukrainian Church were Russian churches, they had like it was a gang war. It was terrific, trust me. So Russians were calling Ukrainian church like infidels, betrayers, traitors. Anyways, and in 2019, I'm trying to make this story as short as possible. In 2019, Ukraine received a Tomos from the Universal Patriarch in Constantinople, who said, "Yeah, we were wrong back then, and here you can have autonomy. Okay, Ukrainian Church can have autonomy." And basically, Ukrainian Church became recognized by the Constantinople. Again, Russians did not recognize it, but more and more churches of the Russian patriarchate, Russian churches on the Ukrainian territory, started joining the Ukrainian Church because it became officially recognized. It was a completely it was their internal interconfessional politics. It was important, but state could not influence those things. Usually, when we were talking about church, state was besides church. even though church was present in everyday's life and yada yada, but according to our legislation, church was separate from the state, which wasn't the case, but it was supposed to be like that. So the Russian church was known for those guys. And those guys were so-called not Cossacks, because Cossacks are Ukrainian kick-ass soldiers of the medieval times. Those are казачки. Кубанские, Донские казачки. They were basically drunkards from like Kuban and Rostov and things like that. And those were members of paramilitary organizations controlled by Russian Church. What they were used for? They were used to guard and patrol and like Russian churches and capture Ukrainian churches. Because I told you that there was like a gang war back then, and those paramilitaries, they were capturing a lot of Ukrainian churches. 2014, the war in Ukraine started, and those paramilitaries, they became closely connected to the separatist movement fueled by Russians. Separatist movement in Donbass, and those казачки, they were supporting separatism, they were calling Russians, they were calling Russian troops and Putin, and they were joining those terrorist organizations in the so-called LPR and DPR. And for example, here you can see Russian priest blessing those казачки in the uncontrolled Donbass. Here's another picture. Those are Russian казачки, pro-Russian казачки and Russian казачки, and the Russian priest, the priest of the Russian Church. When this shit hit the fan at Donbass, and Russians stationed 30,000 men without patches on the territory of Donbass, and they proclaimed those artificially created republics, so-called, and things like that. What did the Russian Church do? So the Russian Church was wholeheartedly supporting the Russian terrorism. They were welcoming the separatism and things like that. And at the same time, are those little green men? Those are exactly the green men. At the same time, they still were active on the controlled territory. They could easily move between like Donetsk and Kyiv and back. And at the same time, the Russian Church, okay, from the territory of Russia, they would come to Kyiv, for example, to the Pechersk Lavra that belonged to Russian Church because they captured it back in 17th century. They took money, they brought them to Russia, and they transferred to Russia hilarious amount of money. Because again, KGB and yada yada. But Russian priests were known for supporting separatism. During those meetings, like every Sunday and things like that, they were talking to people coming to churches, and they were spreading those ideas of Russian world, of Ukrainian inferiority, Russian superiority, and that we all belong to Tsar and shit like that. And here, for example, you can see one of the priests of the Russian Church wearing those terrorist colors of the Here you can see a Russian priest blessing Russian soldiers, and then this individual would go to Kyiv and spread his ideology among Ukrainian population. And we were like, what the heck? Like, why does it even happen? Like, why? Here you can see, for example, again, the priest of the Ukrainian church, but it's a like Russian priest. No, it's wrong. A priest of a Russian church on Ukrainian territory in Donetsk, blessing the notorious Girkin Strelkov, the man accused of shooting down MH17 Boeing over Donbass using Russian anti-air system brought from Russia in the days when Putin claimed that there are no Russian soldiers in Donbass. And on this picture you can see another priest of the Russian church together with some dirty terrorists and mobsters. And on the right there you can see this Arseny Pavlov, also known as Motorola. And Arseny Pavlov was killing and shooting Ukrainian soldiers, torturing Ukrainian people. And that man in the center with the Holy Cross on his chest would bless him, and then he would go to Ukrainian territory, to the controlled territory of Ukraine, and spread his ideas among Ukrainians. Oh my God. This is the Russian priest during those revolts, during the coup, basically, that took place in Donbass, when Russians would remove Ukrainian flags, install Russian flags because they were calling Putin and his troops, and Russian priests were waiting for this so much. And when Ukrainian soldiers came to Kramatorsk and removed Russian terrorists, and Strelkov Girkin was running away like crazy with his pants painted brown on the back and yellow in the front, those priests were standing there and shouting fascists at Ukrainian troops because they don't know other words. But the most famous story is the story of this sexy mofo. So this terrorist, this murderer, his name is Rafael Lusvargi, and his story is very, very famous in Ukraine. So Rafael Lusvargi came from Brazil and joined the terrorist forces. Here you can see him during an actual shootout, shooting Ukrainian troops. And of course, there's a Russian television recording all this. And he was very famous among Russian terrorists. And there you can see, by the way, him hugging some very Donbass-looking man. He looks like all the locals in Donbass. I mean, like he's Buryat or Yakut, of course. And he was very, very famous among those terrorists. And then he kind of disappeared. And miraculously, he appeared in Kyiv. And like he was living in Kyiv. That picture is taken in Obolon district of Kyiv years later after those pictures that you saw. And he was living there and hanging out and having a good time. And how do you think? What kind of church is that? Like, you have no chance to be wrong with the answer. So after killing plenty of Ukrainian soldiers and torturing plenty of Ukrainian civilians in Donbass, Brazilian terrorist Rafael Luswargi moved to Kyiv secretly and settled on the territory of the Russian Church. And Russian Church was giving him shelter and food, and he felt completely safe there on their territory because the Ukrainian junta, Ukrainian fascists, they absolutely abstained from all the church business. Like, it's a Russian church, you do whatever you want to do. Like, it's out of our business. We don't want to mess with you because state is separate, church is separate. This is how it's supposed to be in a normal country. And because of that, Russian terrorists and pro-Russian terrorists could easily travel between churches on the whole territory of Ukraine. And famous terrorist Luswargi, or rather notorious terrorist Luswargi, lived on the territory of Russian Church in Kyiv downtown. Until he was captured by activists who said, like, a lot of those activists were actually Ukrainian veterans who fought against this bastard in Donbass. And they were like, are you freaking kidding? Like, are you serious? So they performed civilian arrest. They brought this bastard to the security service of Ukraine, where he was captured and he faced the trial for everything he did. I have to have a smoke and coffee. So, what we know? We know that Russian Church was traveling over Ukraine, traveling to the occupied territories, blessing terrorists and spreading the word of Russia among Ukrainian population on the Ukrainian-controlled territory. And they were also bringing a lot of money to the Russia, right? To the terror Russia. So eventually, and it was already 8 years after the war started in Ukraine, and 1 year after the full-scale invasion in Ukraine. Eventually, the security service of Ukraine was given an order to freaking raid those churches because we had enough. And a lot of interesting things were found, guys. So, for example, there in the top right corner, you can see Donbass is Russia. Different stickers of separatist nature that were spread and shared by those priests between themselves and between the people on the controlled territory. They would go to like Zakarpattia, they would go to like Vinnytsia, Zhytomyr, Chernihiv, and spread that bullshit. That is the flag of Novorossiya, so-called terrorist organization that was created basically by Russians, and that is a terrorist flag. It's illegal even to have. It's like having a flag of ISIS. It's the same in Ukraine. Again, all that was found in Russian churches on Ukrainian territory. That is Russian news, some old-looking newspaper, again found there, a bunch of business cards, but whatever. The title in the bottom says, instead of titans, there come bastards. The role of Khrushchev in destruction of our beautiful USSR. So remember I showed you pictures of those communists looting churches. In their minds, USSR was a good thing, even though thousands of priests were executed, eliminated, brought to gulags, and deported, and looted, of course. But still, because it's a Russian church, they cannot confess that, like, big part of the Russian history is a freaking massacre. No, Russia is a beautiful God's chosen land, and our beautiful USSR, where they all lived like friends, like it was a good thing. Oh, here we have stop spilling blood, and I think it was dedicated to like anti-terrorist operation in Donbass. Stop spilling blood. Let's have peace. One nation, one Orthodox faith, one country, and it's made in colors of Russian flag, of course. Oh, what we have here. The magazine is called The Russian House, Russian Home, Feeling of Novorossiya. Strelkov and his guys, Strelkovцы. And that is a separatist literature that, again, those priests were sharing and spreading between themselves and between the public that would visit their church, okay? Because Ukrainian citizens would visit their church. For example, there's a village and the only church they have is a Russian church. People in Ukrainian villages, they are faithful. They want to go to church, but they don't want to travel to another town, okay? They want to go to their own church. And this church is Russian. And in this place, they are given that shit, okay? And told that they belong to the great Russian Empire. Money, of course. So Russian priests were bringing enormous money to Moscow, basically. Whenever that Patriarch Kirill, the Gundyaev, would visit Ukraine, he would return with cash. I mean, return back to Moscow with cash, big cash. I remember this Peczerska Lavra, okay? The one that I showed you in the beginning. The most expensive cars you can imagine, like Bentley, Bugatti, whatever, you could see parked there because Russian priests had them. The chief of the Russian chief of the Peczerska Lavra, he had a nickname Pasha Mercedes because he liked Mercedes-Benz. And here we have Russian ideology. And by saying Russian ideology, we mean, of course, the Russian world, this element of the hybrid warfare. What else do we have? Like, because we have a lot of stuff that was found there. Again, money, those are Ukrainian money, and those are big money because 1,000 hryvnias is around 30 bucks. 30 bucks is a big money in Ukraine. You can buy a lot of stuff for 30 bucks. Rubles, Russian rubles. Yes. No idea what they do here. Again, those were found there somewhere around their things. But the most precious thing to me is this one. And this one comes from the Russian Orthodox Church in Bryansk, Russia. And what it says is basically, you are Russian warrior. Your how do you say it? Your responsibility is to protect your fatherland from Ukrainian imperialists. Guys, Ukrainian imperialists, like that huge evil Ukraine that wanted to attack that small and peaceful Russia. Okay, like of course I'm kidding, of course. And they say that thing that is in surrounded by the red color. Okay, it says like literally, your task is to wipe Ukrainian nation from the face of the earth. I cannot understand what it says. But anyways, so the church, okay, the one that is created to spread the ideas of love and friendship and whatever, literally calls Russian people to erase the Ukrainian nation from the face of the earth. And those very people would go to Ukraine and serve their rituals in Ukrainian churches, on Ukrainian land, speaking to Ukrainian people, those that they called to eliminate in their country, in Bryansk, in Russia. So whenever the supporters of the Russian terrorism, like on the West, in Europe, whatever, whenever they say Ukrainian Satanists are shutting down churches, they destroyed all possible, they violated all possible rights, all possible freedoms that people have by like destroying the religion. Like, how could they do it? Whenever they say that shit, the only thing I can think about is I keep wondering, how did the Russian church, how did the Russian agents, KGB spies, and supporters of Russian terrorism, like direct supporters of Russian terrorism, how come they survived so long? I mean, how come they were only banned 1 year after the full-scale invasion in Ukraine? And the answer is very simple. It's because state is separate and religion is separate. It's because the state, our government, our law enforcement, and things like that, they didn't want to, let's say, they didn't want to have like civil unrest. They didn't want to intrude into internal business of like religion, churches, and things like that. Because again, Ukraine is a free country where people can have freedom of faith, but when this freedom is directed at destroying the Ukrainian state and wiping the Ukrainian nation and supporting of terrorism, it's not a freedom. It's a freaking support of terrorism. It's as if you could go into a mosque in New York downtown, for example, and the priest of this mosque, they're called differently, but anyways, he would say, you should destroy the American nation and you should support ISIS. Like literally. And then you would go to, you would come up to a cop and say, dude, they're spreading like terrorism in the mosque. And the cop would be like, I don't want to intrude, okay? It like it's their internal business. So that is exactly the situation that we had. Luckily, those terrorist organizations on the territory of Ukraine were imam. Yeah, thank you for saying me. Yeah, I completely forgot. So luckily, those terrorist organizations are freaking banned, and hopefully they will all return to Russia and do whatever the F they want to do and not return to Ukraine. Фелікс, там не було написано про націоналістів, там було написано про українську націю. Ти долбойоб. So, that's the story. And now I can answer your questions if you have them. I hope you like the story. I like the above all, I like the picture of Moscow that time because it was a good place. I mean, there were a lot of trees back then, a lot of animals. You could have a nice time there. You could have like barbecue, go camping with your friends, die from diarrhea because they had no medicine from diarrhea back then, for example. But it was a nice place. Mosquitoes, though, bears, but in general, it was nice. If you wanted to run away from like life in a big country, like life in a big city, like Kyiv, yeah, you could go to Kuchkovo, that forest, and have some nice time there. Yeah, FF 1073. That's Putin and Xi finally meeting. Yeah. Could be their like grandparents. Totally. I spent almost 50 minutes. I spent almost 50 minutes. I will turn off those bears. I spent 50 minutes explaining you the story. I think that Timothy Snyder would do it more efficiently with more details, of course, but I did it my way, the PR specialist way. Okay. So, Braith Miller, do you think most FSB Russo Church has been removed from Ukraine? Not all of them. Not all of them, unfortunately, because like there's hundreds and thousands of them on the territory of Ukraine. Rodent of Anger, Operator Starsky needs a cat. Dear Rodent, I don't need a cat because I don't want one more living being in my house to hate me. Okay? Fudge is enough, and 100 of my ants. Trine. I'm so bad with pronouncing names. Where can I get a mug like that? Unfortunately, I have no idea. It's always been here. I don't own it. Shelley Winters, did they deport them or boot them out of Ukraine? Actually not, because those priests of those Russian churches, they are Ukrainian citizens. We cannot deport them. They are Ukrainian citizens, but the churches they served in, they are kind of banned. So they cannot perform all those terrorist activities that they did there. But majority of those priests, they are Ukrainian citizens. Tinke Tinke, what coffee are you are drinking? It's a coffee with milk and like 5 spoons of sugar. Uh, Mark Garcia, is Starsky your call sign? How did you pick it? It's a call sign. It doesn't mean anything at all. Just a random last name, because I had to call my Facebook somehow. Do know any news on Kadyrov? Well, I saw Kadyrov like a bit more inflated than he was like last year, and Tom Lobos, my religion is food. I feel you, my friend. I totally do. My theory regarding Kadyrov was that because he liked driving that armored car that was brought to him from Chernobyl area, and that same car spent quite some time in the trench, deep trench made in the Red Forest, maybe it was a hello from Chernobyl, because again, people how do you call it, disembark from this car. People come in this car, they bring the soil, the magic soil from Chernobyl. So maybe Chernobyl somehow like got his ass. It's just my theory. It could be. Alvin Archer, what did Fuchs have for dinner and how many belly rubs today? So, plenty of belly rubs, I think maybe 15. And he had different stuff, different yummies for... he has like different sorts of meat every day. So he feels okay. He even had milk today. John Rock, when people say something like noodle in hands, what is that mean and why noodle? Noodle in hands? I have no idea. I've never heard that. Andres Silva, why do you prefer to smoke power banks? Are you afraid of exploding cigarettes? So I prefer to smoke power banks because they charge me. This is how I keep myself sober and awake. This is how I keep myself running. Radioactive Kadyrov. It's just a theory. Again, guys, I don't know. I don't know what's his radiation scale. Okay, hopefully we will learn about it someday. Milk is not good for dogs. Yes, I know. That's why I gave him like this much milk. Salad77, I saw an interview with you in a Polish documentary, Ukraine the First Day, an excellent document. I don't remember the... yeah, I remember the Polish journalists. There were a lot of them, guys. In February, I had 50 requests for the interviews. And because there are not many guys currently here in my location who can tell about Hostomel, because like all of the conscripts are they quit, okay. Some of them continue serving, but in other places, and the guys that are still here, every time I call them, they don't pick up the phone because they know that I will ask them to give an interview, and they run away from me because they had like 50 interviews already. And because I'm such a good friend and a press officer, I do all I can to save their asses. So whenever there are journalists, I go like, okay, I will tell you about the Hostomel, and then they my friends, they get very upset because they say, dude, like, watching all the reports about Hostomel that there are out there, one can come to a conclusion that you are the only one who fought there, which is not true, of course. And I go, yes, that's why you should pick up the phone. AK Crowd 74, hi buddy. Did you get issued a new UR-15? Unfortunately, I didn't. Unfortunately, I still have my AK. But I can tell you this, even though AK is a primitive and old stuff, but I can still shoot it well. In case there are Russian terrorists around, like, I have 120 bullets here, plus additional rounds. It means at least 120 200s. What do you think of the EU helping with ammo? Question from Kelly. I think it's great because when we receive ammo, it means that we can eliminate Russian terrorists, and that's exactly what we're doing right now. Jane, goat milk is not so bad. I agree with you. So, back in my days, in a village, I had a grandma and she had goats, and goat milk was my favorite milk because I like milk in general, but the goats, they hang out at this area where they had, just a minute, I will translate it, the tarragon or wormwood. Yeah, wormwood. And basically they consumed the wormwood, and the milk they produced, it was kind of a bit bitter, you know, and it was so good. Andre Silva, have you recently talked with someone fighting in Bakhmut? Actually, yeah, I talk with them several times a day. The situation in Bakhmut is, let's say, stabilizing. I would call it this way, even though it's still the hottest spot on the front lines. But at the same time, we will not see Russians performing something bigger than previously in that area. Trust my words. Tone Ottesen, in Norway we have goat cheese. I think we have. I think we have goat cheese too. Deb, last time didn't you say I can tell you something, but not until a few more days? Basically it was about the counterattack performed by armed forces of Ukraine in Bakhmut, where they improved our positions a bit, and though even though Russians are trying to encircle Bakhmut, but they will not be able to do that. When I told you that Bakhmut is holding, it means Bakhmut is holding. They will not take it. Unless it's completely destroyed like Severodonetsk or Rubizhne. That is the only option. How's Bogdan doing? So Bogdan is doing all right. He's serving already. He returned to the service. I cannot tell you exactly where, but he's fine. Ellie, chat wants to know how Grandpa. So I still have to meet Grandpa. I keep reminding myself, but it's just I always have no time to do that. I will, I promise. Do know the Chechens provide their own milk for their goats. Badger milk. My God. Do you see which? Rhonda, unfortunately, I don't know her personally. I'm subscribed to her updates in Telegram. Nelly Cat, it seems I am the only person who have a Starsky Riotic Wear woman's hoodie in the world. I think you are. I don't have that hoodie. Mr. Moid, is it still very wet there? When is the spring offensive coming? So currently it's, I would say, pretty warm, because today I worked with 2 journalist groups here in Hostomel. It was sunny, it was warm, and by the end of the week it will be something like plus 19 Celsius. Which is very warm, and I'm going to take my dad to some very, very special place. Last weekend we visited the Museum of the War here in Kyiv, and we also visited a museum of Chernobyl. Those 2 places are very special for my dad because he's a military and he's a Chernobyl liquidator. And that in that museum of Chernobyl, there's a bunch of his stuff. He's mentioned there also in the book of like donators, and it was a very special trip again because unfortunately my dad cannot walk well, and it was the first time he actually left his house in a year. So we spent a great time. Mr. Diggs, how many places do you sleep in while traveling around the whole country of Ukraine? I don't really travel much because I'm attached to my garrison, which is in the Kyiv Oblast. So I cannot travel like a common civilian person. I saw someone in Telegram advertising handguns for sale in Ukraine. Thoughts on Ukraine ending up with problems like the US. So I will. I don't want to tell you this secret, but in 99.999 cases, if you contact such people, and try to buy or sell weapons, you will end up in jail. So don't trade weapons. It's bad. Okay, what else? Adam, did Kadyrov marry his favorite goat? I know that he married his favorite donkey, but like I don't know whether he's allowed to have multiple wives. I mean, husbands. Is your dad as cool as his son? Tony, I think he's like 100 times cooler. Trust me. Smith, feel silly asking, but who is Cotton Cutie? So, Cotton Cutie, and I will even show it to you, because I can. Okay, where do we have it? Here it is. I mean, I already explained it in one of my previous videos, but you will like it because I like it too. So this is the Cotton Cutie. Whoa, I didn't see this one. This one is kick-ass. So this is Cotton Cutie, also known as Bavovnyatko, and this is a creature from the Ukrainian folklore, and it comes to the Russian soldiers who smoke, and it brings cotton. So whenever Russians are talking about like cotton or fire or electricity issues that caused massive like explosions and things like that, that is due to the Cotton Cutie, because Cotton Cutie is so good. Cody, thank you for today's lesson over Ukraine's history. Anytime, I love to explain this stuff. Zane Ryan, so they're coping with the Ukrainian resistance by building sandcastle trenches on Crimea's beaches. Sad. Yeah, we know that they're building trenches, they're building their defensive positions in Crimea as well. And in the area of Vuhledar, we already have this information. It's not a secret. Russians are preparing defensive positions as well. So even though they're trying to kinda attack there, but in reality, I think it's like a feint. Daughter of Texas. My daughter think this is a Ukrainian Pokemon. That's so sweet. Cotton Cutie might be actually a Ukrainian Pokemon. Why not? Chris, Starsky, when are you going on the Enforcer channel again? As soon as Enforcer texts me, maybe he already did and I missed that. I gotta check out, because unfortunately I receive a lot of messages and sometimes I get lost among them. Polycount, have you heard what Ukrainian hackers done with Shaheds in Crimea tonight? Let me see. Because... oh no. Aha, that is interesting. No, those are old news. Those are old news. I have no idea actually. Hmm. No, unfortunately, I have no updates regarding hackers yet. Oh, by the way, tomorrow you will meet one very very special person. He's my good buddy Yemelyan from Rostov, and he lives here in Hostomel. And I give you 100% that you will absolutely love Yemelyan, and I will make a separate video about him, and it will be amazing. So stay tuned. Martin, I heard a Ukrainian soldier playing the March of the New Army song. Uh, it's a great, uh, great like song. It is, and uh, it's one of the most kick-ass marching songs in like Ukraine ever created. I think it's really cool. It's kind of brutal, uh, and I I had a small task actually to create a marching song for my brigade as well. I failed. I confess I failed, but it was a very cool experience of working together, of working with symphonic instruments. Um, it was nice, and maybe later I will be able to finish it properly. Alvin Archer, did you find another Rostov mouse? Almost, almost. You will see tomorrow, I promise. Okay, friends, I think it's a good time to say goodnight because it's 15 past midnight. I will go have another coffee and go to bed, smiling happily because uh, tonight we destroyed another portion of Russian propaganda, and in the upcoming stream we will talk about a horrible, horrible violation of freedom of speech and Ukrainian dictatorship banning the independent Russian media. Like, how can you even use those words in the same sentence? Independent Russian media. Anyways, I hope it will be useful for you and for me as well. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying with me tonight. My name is Operator Starsky, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.